Nobody remembers perfection. They remember the one who dared to be real. We live in a world drowning in filters and facades. Smiles staged for the camera. Words polished for approval. Images edited until the human underneath is unrecognizable. And yet, for all this performance, people still feel invisible, empty, and replaceable. Why? Because perfection does not connect. Authenticity does. Carl Jung revealed a truth most of us run from. He said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your parents expected, not who your job prefers, not who your friends find most comfortable, but you, the flawed, raw, unfiltered you. That is where power lives. That is where unforgettable presence is born. Think about the people who left the deepest mark on you. Were they the flawless ones who always seemed untouchable? Or were they the ones who made you feel it was okay not to have it all together? The ones who laughed without hesitation, who cried without apology, who carried scars not as shame but as proof they survived. Those people stay with us. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Let me tell you a story. A young speaker walked onto a stage in front of thousands. He stuttered on his first words. His slides broke. His hands shook. By all accounts, he was failing. But then he did something most never dare. He put down the microphone, took a deep breath, and said, "I am terrified right now, but I am going to give you everything I have." The audience erupted. They leaned in. They remembered him long after the polished speakers faded. Why? Because he was real. Because he stopped performing and started connecting. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily in his journal not to impress others but to understand himself. Epictetus didn't chase attention. He mastered his inner world. And that mastery, that inner steadiness, is the real flex. Owning your truth so fully that you stop needing anyone's permission to be powerful. But here's the problem. Most of us have been taught the opposite. We were told to play small, to water down our opinions, to mute our excitement, to avoid taking up too much space, because being fully ourselves was branded as risky. Too loud, too different, too much. Yet every person who ever changed the world was all of those things. Too much for someone, not enough for others, and exactly enough for themselves. Aristotle said knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But how do you know yourself if you've spent years becoming the version the world told you to be? The truth is simple. You don't. You perform. You forget. And eventually, you break. So let me ask you, where are you pretending just to be accepted? Where are you hiding behind a mask because you fear rejection? Sit with that question. It might sting. But the cracks in your identity are not your weakness. They are your starting point. Because the moment you stop hiding, something incredible happens. The people who are meant for you find you. Not the ones who tolerate your shine, but the ones who reflect it back. And the ones who cannot handle your truth, they fall away, quietly, naturally, without a fight. Let them go. Authenticity is not about being flawless. It is about being whole. And wholeness is far more compelling than perfection. When you bring your real self into the world, you don't need to beg for space. You become the space. Your presence lingers even after you leave the room. Not because you shouted, but because you carried truth. So if you want to be unforgettable, stop polishing the outside. Stop performing for approval and start doing the harder work. Integrate the messy parts. Bring them into the light. Because what you've been hiding might be the very thing that makes you unforgettable. Growth. Everyone claims they want it. Few understand what it really looks like. Because real growth isn't about chasing applause. It isn't about racking up milestones for the highlight reel. It is about letting go of old versions of yourself without losing your soul in the process. Most people confuse growth with performance. They shapeshift to fit in, not to level up. They change costumes, but never character. Fitting in is not belonging. One changes your outfit. The other changes your life. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That is the heart of transformation. It is not about impressing others with how much you've changed. It is about looking in the mirror and knowing that every step forward was chosen, not forced, not pressured, not a survival tactic, but a decision, a quiet, grounded decision to become better. Not for them. For you. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. Simple. Direct. No performance. Just embodiment. Growth wasn't about achievements. It was about character. Becoming someone whose inner world wasn't ruled by outside noise. Here is the paradox. Choosing to grow does not mean you hate who you are. It means you love yourself enough not to stay stagnant. That is the difference. People who fear change think growth is rejection. But real growth is respect. It says, I honor how far I've come, and I refuse to let this be my limit. But let's be honest. Growth is not glamorous. It is messy, sometimes lonely, sometimes painful. It means saying goodbye to people who only like the quieter, safer version of you. And that goodbye can sting. But self-respect always costs something. And it is worth the price. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. To examine your life is not to judge it. It is to notice where you've grown, where you're stuck, where you've compromised your values just to fit into rooms you never even wanted to be in. That awareness is power. Because you cannot change what you refuse to face. So here is the truth. You are allowed to outgrow what once felt like home. You are allowed to shed labels that no longer define you. Growth is not betrayal. Growth is truth. And remember this. Excellence is not an act. It is a habit. Aristotle taught us that. Growth works the same way. Not a one-time leap, but a daily decision. Choosing reflection over reaction. Discipline over impulse. Courage over comfort. That is why repetition matters. Every time you slow your words instead of rushing. Every time you meet someone's eyes instead of looking away. Every time you set a boundary instead of bending. You are laying a brick. One brick may not look like much, but 1,000 bricks, laid with intention, build a foundation strong enough to carry a new identity. Growth is not about abandoning yourself. It is about refining yourself. Think of it like upgrading your system. You are not replacing the core. You are cleaning the programming, removing glitches, unlocking features you didn't know you had. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. It means shedding the parts of you built on fear, on pleasing others, on avoiding discomfort. Not everything you picked up was meant to stay. Some beliefs, some habits, some identities. They were survival tools. They served their purpose. But now, they keep you small. So let me ask you, what are you still carrying that you no longer need? What habits are you still repeating out of fear, not alignment? Because growth is not about announcing your evolution. It is about living it. It is written in how you walk into a room, in how you handle silence, in how you choose peace over chaos. And when you reach that point, you will know. Not because the world praises you, but because your own silence speaks louder than their noise. There will come a day when someone questions you. It might be subtle, hidden in a doubtful glance, or direct, spoken plainly for everyone to hear. In that moment, your instinct may be to shrink back and avoid the tension, or to lash out with anger. But neither silence nor rage builds real confidence. True strength shows itself in calm persistence. Confidence does not beg for approval. It does not collapse under scrutiny. It proves itself through steady action, repeated until even the harshest critics have nothing left to say. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you." When doubt arises, the real test is revealed. Do you know who you are? Or are you waiting for the world to define it for you? Let me tell you about a young artist. For years, she painted in silence, showing her work only to close friends. When she finally dared to share it publicly, critics mocked her. They said her style was strange, her colors too intense. For a moment, she almost quit, but instead of retreating, she kept painting. Day after day, brushstroke after brushstroke, until the same critics who dismissed her began to whisper a different tune. Her persistence silenced their doubt. She didn't need their permission. Her consistency built her authority. This is the quiet power of holding your ground. You don't argue with doubt. You outlast it. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that everything we hear is opinion, not fact. Everything we see is perspective, not truth. Other people's doubt is just perspective. It is not reality. Your task is to prove truth with action. Here is where discipline enters. To hold your ground requires clarity. If you don't know your values, if you don't know why you are doing what you are doing, every voice of doubt will sway you. But if you are rooted, if your purpose is strong, doubt becomes background noise. Think about the leaders you respect. Their power did not come from defending themselves against every critic. It came from consistency, from calm steadiness when others panicked, from carrying themselves with such grounded presence that words became secondary. People followed them not because they shouted, but because they stood firm. In professional life, this steadiness is magnetic. A colleague who remains calm under pressure earns respect more quickly than the one who rushes to defend themselves. In personal life, it builds trust. Your partner, your friends, your children, they learn to rely on you because your steadiness is not fragile. It does not vanish when challenged. Epictetus taught that it is not what happens to you but how you respond that matters. That response is your character. When you hold your ground, you are not proving yourself to others. You are proving yourself to yourself. And here's the secret. The greatest transformation happens not when the world finally believes in you, but when you finally believe in yourself. When your actions have built enough evidence that the voice of doubt, inside or out, can no longer compete with the proof of what you have done. So when the next test comes, pause. Do not shrink. Do not explode. Stand steady. Move forward anyway. In time, the voices of doubt will fade, but your strength will remain. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill every pause with words, stumbling over sentences just to avoid the weight of quiet. But silence, when owned, becomes magnetic. It is not emptiness. It is presence. Think of the great leaders and storytellers. Their power did not come from endless speech. It came from the spaces between their words. A pause before a key point builds anticipation. A pause after a question creates reflection. Silence turns speech into music. Without it, everything is noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Silence is that calm mind made visible. To hold it without panic is to prove you are not ruled by fear." I once knew a teacher who transformed his classroom not with volume but with stillness. When the room grew loud, he did not shout. He stood in silence, tall and steady. The students quieted themselves, sensing something powerful in his composure. His authority came not from noise, but from presence. This is the paradox. Silence feels vulnerable. A pause exposes you. It forces you to stand without distraction. And yet, this is exactly why it is so powerful. It strips away the unnecessary and reveals what is real. In everyday life, silence can change the shape of conversations. A well-timed pause after someone finishes speaking shows that you were listening, not just waiting for your turn. That pause communicates respect. It tells the other person, "Your words mattered enough for me to let them land." In conflict, silence protects you from regret. How many arguments escalate because words were fired too quickly? A pause, just one breath, gives you space to align your intention with your delivery. What could have been a harsh reply becomes a measured one. Seneca said speech is the index of the mind. A rushed tongue reveals a restless mind. A steady pause reveals clarity. But silence is not only defensive, it is creative. In stillness, new ideas emerge. A mind constantly filled with chatter rarely produces depth. It is in the quiet that insight rises. There is also a physical element. Silence, delivered with restless fidgeting, feels uncertain. Silence, held with steady posture, feels authoritative. Your body anchors the pause. Shoulders steady, breath calm, eyes clear. That combination transforms silence from absence into presence. Consider this. When someone challenges you publicly, the instinct is to defend yourself immediately. But if you pause, calmly, deliberately, you send a different signal. You show you are not rattled. The silence itself becomes a statement of confidence. People notice. They remember. The Stoics practiced this daily. They understood that composure is strength. To pause before reacting is to prove that your mind, not your circumstances, is in control. So the next time you feel the urge to rush your words, resist. Let silence stretch a little longer than feels comfortable. Notice how the room shifts. Notice how people lean in. And when you do finally speak, your words will carry weight they never had before. Silence is not a weakness to escape. It is a weapon to wield. And when you master it, your presence will speak louder than noise ever could. Before you ever say a word, people have already begun to decide who you are. The way you enter a room speaks louder than any introduction. If you drag your feet, slump your shoulders, or move without intention, you send a message of hesitation. You make yourself invisible even while standing in plain sight. But when you walk with upright posture, steady rhythm, and quiet assurance, something shifts. People notice. They feel it before they understand it. It is not arrogance. It is not a performance. It is presence. Human beings are wired to read body language long before we process words. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors relied on these cues to decide if someone was a threat, a leader, or someone safe to follow. That instinct is still alive today. People may not consciously analyze your walk, but they feel it. They register the confidence in your posture, the rhythm in your stride, the steadiness in your breath. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Every step you take is a quiet doing. It speaks louder than promises, shaping how others experience you before you open your mouth. I remember watching a leader enter a crowded hall. He didn't rush. He didn't wave his arms or demand attention. He simply walked upright, shoulders steady, eyes forward, each step deliberate. Within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. Conversation softened. Eyes turned. Not because he demanded the room, but because he carried himself in a way that made the room lean in. That is the power of presence. It does not begin when you open your mouth. It begins when you cross the threshold. And here is the hidden truth. The body influences the mind as much as the mind influences the body. On the days you slump, shuffle, and shrink, your mind follows. Confidence feels distant. Conversations feel harder. But when you stand tall, when you move with awareness, your energy shifts. You feel sharper, more alive, more engaged. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Often, we imagine that confidence must come from deep belief before action. But reality shows us something different. Action creates belief. The way you move shapes the way you think. The posture of confidence builds the presence of confidence. Think about how differently you feel in silence depending on your posture. If you stand restless, eyes darting, silence feels awkward. But if you stand calm, shoulders squared, breath steady, silence feels deliberate. The same moment becomes powerful, not because of words, but because of presence. So how do you master this? Start with awareness. Notice how you enter rooms. Notice your pace, your shoulders, your breath. Are you drifting or are you arriving? Then practice intention. Set a rhythm in your steps. Align your body with the message you want to send. Let your physical presence reflect the inner steadiness you are building. Over time, this becomes automatic. You no longer need to remind yourself to walk with presence. It becomes who you are. People will feel it even before they understand why. And you will feel it too. Because every step will remind you, you are not here to shrink. You are here to arrive. Presence is not about domination. It is about respect. Respect for yourself and respect for the moment. So the next time you enter a room, remember this. Your walk is your first sentence. Make it speak with intention. Confidence is not built in a single burst of courage. It is not one moment of bravery that changes everything. It is built in the quiet, consistent rhythm of repetition. Every time you look someone in the eye instead of looking away, every time you slow your words instead of rushing, every time you choose to act when fear tempts you to freeze, these are the bricks. One may not look like much, but over time they build the foundation of an identity strong enough to carry the weight of respect. People search for turning points. They hope for the dramatic gesture, the bold act that will erase insecurity. But real change rarely happens that way. It happens in the unremarkable moments, repeated daily until they carve a new self. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Repetition proves this. You can say you want to be confident, disciplined, respected. But unless you repeat the actions that embody those qualities, they remain empty promises. Think of an athlete training for greatness. They do not wait for inspiration. They show up every day, repeating the same movements until their body knows them by heart. Confidence works the same way. At first, it may feel forced. You remind yourself to speak slowly, to stand tall, to hold silence. But the more you repeat, the less it feels forced. The actions become natural. Confidence stops being something you practice and starts being something you live. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Repetition is the mother of transformation. But here is the challenge. Repetition is often boring. It lacks the thrill of dramatic acts, and that is exactly why it works. Anyone can act brave once. Few can show discipline daily. That is why repetition builds a strength that cannot be faked. There is also a hidden power in repetition. It builds self-trust. Each time you follow through, even in small things, you prove to yourself that you can be relied on. And self-trust is the root of unshakable confidence. Because when you know you can trust yourself, doubt loses its grip. Think about brushing your teeth. It is not dramatic, but done daily, it prevents decay. In the same way, repeated acts of self-respect prevent the decay of confidence. Each deliberate choice, however small, accumulates into a strength that no criticism can shake. The Stoics practiced this daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself every morning, not because he was weak, but because he knew discipline required repetition. Epictetus taught that it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Repetition keeps you humble, keeps you learning, keeps you growing. So the next time you feel that progress is too slow, remember this. Repetition is not failure. Repetition is the work, and it is the work that shapes who you become. Confidence is not a mask you put on. It is the quiet rhythm of small acts, repeated until they become your nature. So ask yourself, what are the small bricks you can lay today? What habits, repeated daily, will build the foundation of the person you want to become? Lay them, repeat them, trust the process. Because repetition may feel invisible, but one day you will wake up unrecognizable, not because of one leap, but because of 1,000 small steps. The world has a habit of labeling people who feel deeply, too emotional, too sensitive, too intense. You may have heard these words, perhaps you even believe them, but let me tell you the truth. Emotional depth is not weakness, it is strength. Carl Jung once said, There is no coming to consciousness without pain. What he meant was simple. The depth of your emotions is the doorway to wisdom. It is not there to break you, it is there to wake you. In a world that numbs itself with endless scrolling, constant noise, and shallow distractions, the rare soul who feels fully is unforgettable. They notice what others miss. They walk into a room and sense what is unsaid. Their intuition is sharp, their connections deeper. That is not fragility, that is power. Think about the last person who made you feel truly seen. Was it the one who stayed detached, uninterested, unshaken? Or was it the one whose emotions met yours with honesty, whose eyes reflected back your struggle, whose words carried compassion? We do not remember people for their indifference. We remember them for their ability to care. Aristotle spoke of moderation, but he did not mean suppression. He meant mastery. To feel without drowning, to love without losing yourself, to express without chaos. That is emotional maturity. The Stoics themselves did not deny emotion. Marcus Aurelius felt grief. Epictetus felt pain. Seneca felt loss. But they refused to let emotions become their rulers. They acknowledged them, understood them, and directed them. That is the balance you must learn. Your emotions are fire. Left uncontrolled, they burn. But directed, they light the path. They warm those around you. They fuel your courage. So the next time someone tells you that you are too much, remember this. What they really mean is that your intensity cannot be controlled. Your passion makes them question their apathy. Your honesty makes them uncomfortable with their masks. Your fire makes their coldness impossible to ignore. That is not your flaw. That is their projection. Here is the shift you must make. Stop apologizing for your depth. Stop diluting yourself to make others comfortable. You are not here to be less. You are here to be fully alive. Jung believed that authenticity comes from integrating the parts of ourselves we were taught to hide. That includes your intensity, your tears, your laughter, your fire. When you bring them together, you become whole. And wholeness is unforgettable. So feel fully, love fully, live fully. Direct your fire with wisdom, not shame, because your depth is not a burden. It is the very thing that sets you apart. There comes a quiet turning point in every life. The moment you decide you will no longer settle. It does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with clarity. The old patterns, the one-sided relationships, the half-efforts, the drained energy, you begin to see them for what they are, too expensive. Epictetus said, "Never value anything as profitable to yourself that compels you to lose your self-respect." Translation: if keeping something requires you to betray yourself, it is already too costly. Most people live waiting to be chosen, waiting for someone to recognize their worth. But here is the truth. The moment you stop begging for belonging, the moment you stop chasing approval, everything changes. You shift from waiting to choosing, from auditioning for acceptance to deciding who earns access to your life. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. The world will tell you that peace comes from pleasing others. But peace that costs your soul is just disguised self-abandonment. Real peace is built on standards, non-negotiables. Boundaries that do not push people away but filter the right ones in. Here is what happens when you raise your standards. Some people fall away. Let them. Because they were never meant to stay, if your self-respect threatened their control. But the right people rise. They recognize your clarity. They honor your boundaries. They value your presence because you no longer give it away cheaply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. Apply this to respect. Waste no more time arguing how you should be treated. Decide. Set the standard. Live it. When you do, your entire life begins to shift. Conversations grow cleaner. Relationships grow healthier. Energy grows lighter. Because you no longer spend your days repairing the damage of what should never have been allowed in the first place. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Let self-respect become your habit. Let saying no when something feels wrong become natural. Let choosing peace over popularity become instinct. This is not about thinking you are better than anyone else. It is about finally deciding you are not less. And when you carry yourself this way, something rare happens. People feel it. They sense the difference between someone desperate to be liked and someone grounded in their own worth. The latter is magnetic. They do not need to demand respect. Their presence commands it. So today, revisit your standards. Not your wish list, not your fantasy, your non-negotiables. The things that protect your time, your peace, your soul. Because once those are clear, you stop waiting to be treated right. You start expecting it. And that, more than anything else, changes everything. Most people mistake intensity for love. They cling, they chase, they beg to be chosen, thinking that desperation is devotion. But real connection is not built on fear of losing someone. It is built on freedom. The freedom to choose each other again and again, not out of need, but out of fullness. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Yet that is exactly where real love begins. Until you accept yourself, until you fill your own cup, your love will always come with a hidden price tag. It will ask someone else to complete you, to glue back your broken pieces, to carry weight that was never theirs to bear. That is not love. That is survival disguised as affection. But when you stand whole, when you know your worth apart from anyone else, your love changes shape. It becomes lighter. It uplifts instead of suffocates. It flows from overflow, not from emptiness. And that kind of love is rare. That kind of love is unforgettable. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus taught that our peace should never be at the mercy of things outside our control. Love, then, must never be about possession. It must be about presence. I am here because I choose to be, not because I will collapse without you. Think about the people you admire most in relationships. They are not the ones who cling in fear. They are the ones who radiate calm confidence, who walk into a room full of joy that does not depend on approval. Their love feels like a gift, not a lifeline. And that is why it is so magnetic. Boundaries play a role here too. Love without boundaries is not love, it is chaos. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They protect your energy so you can give freely without being drained. They ensure that what you share is not desperation but abundance. Aristotle spoke of the highest form of love as virtuous friendship, where two people seek the good in each other and themselves. That kind of love is not about filling a void, it is about amplifying light. And you can only give it when you have first learned to stand whole. So ask yourself, am I giving love from fear or from freedom, from a wound or from wisdom? Because love that flows from wholeness does not beg, does not demand, does not crumble. It offers, it uplifts, it endures. And in a world where so many are starving for validation, the person who loves from fullness stands apart. That presence is grounding. That energy is rare. And that is why it is unforgettable. We have been sold a lie. That to be loved, respected, or remembered, we must be flawless. That we must erase every mistake, polish every edge, and wear perfection like armor. But here is the truth. Perfection does not connect. Pain does. Struggle does. Humanity does. People do not remember the ones who never cracked. They remember the ones who cracked but did not collapse. The ones who faced the fire and kept moving anyway. The ones who walked into a room carrying not a mask, but their real story, flaws and all. Carl Jung put it simply, what you resist persists, but what you accept transforms. The parts of you have been hiding, the scars, the failures, the intensity, those are not your shame. They are your superpowers. The very things that set you apart, that allow someone else to feel seen, that give others the courage to rise. Socrates taught that the secret to change is not fighting the old, but building the new. That is the essence of growth. You are not here to erase who you were. You are here to build on it, to honor it, to become more. Growth is not betrayal. Growth is truth. And truth is magnetic. Truth is unforgettable. Think about it. The people who left the deepest mark on you, were they the polished, perfect, untouchable ones? Or were they the ones who laughed loudly, cried openly, spoke honestly, and carried their contradictions without apology? Realness is revolutionary in a world drowning in facades. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." Apply this to yourself. Waste no more time arguing how to be unforgettable. Be real. Be whole. Be you. That is the ultimate paradox. The more you chase approval, the less you are remembered. The more you embrace authenticity, the less you can be forgotten. So here is the final call. Stop shrinking. Stop hiding. Stop apologizing for being too much or not enough. Step into the world with presence. Walk into rooms with intention. Speak slowly, with weight. Direct your emotions with wisdom. Repeat small acts of self-respect until they become who you are. Love from wholeness, not emptiness. And above all, let your truth outlive your performance. Because in the end, we are not remembered for being liked by everyone. We are remembered for being real with the few who mattered. That is what makes you unforgettable. You have walked through the lessons. You have seen how presence begins before words, how silence can be strength, how calm energy shifts a room, how boundaries protect your soul, how self-respect sets the standard, how emotional depth is power, how love becomes light when it flows from wholeness, and how growth is truth, not performance. Now, the question is simple. What will you do with it? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, waste no more time. Seneca warned us that life is long if you know how to use it. Socrates declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. These were not words for the past. They are blueprints for now, because the world does not need another flawless mask. It needs you, not the watered-down version, not the one begging for permission, the real you. The one who knows that scars are proof of survival, that depth is strength, that calm is power, that self-respect is freedom. This is how you become unforgettable. Not by being the loudest, not by chasing applause, but by carrying yourself with intention, by showing up with authenticity so rare that people feel it long after you leave. So from this day forward, stop waiting to be chosen. Choose yourself. Stop hiding your truth. Let it breathe. Stop performing for approval. Live for alignment. Because when you do, you create a presence that cannot be ignored. And here is the final truth. The ones who are meant for you will never ask you to shrink. They will rise to meet you. They will reflect your light. The rest will fall away, and you must let them. Because you were never meant to live small. You were meant to become whole. So carry this with you. Every room you enter, every word you speak, every boundary you set, every step you take, let it be rooted in truth. Because truth is magnetic. Truth is strength. Truth is unforgettable. And when your time is done, they will not remember the mask. They will remember the presence. They will remember the way you stood, the way you carried yourself, the way you lived aligned with who you really were. That is your legacy. That is your power. That is the unforgettable path.